Om Sthapakaya cha dharmasya sarvadharmassurupini avatara varishtaya Ramakrishnaya te namaha Sudhismriti purananam alayam karunalayam namami bhagavat padam shankaram lokashankaram. So we are continuing the discussion of some of the verses from this text, Drik Trishya Viveka. Yesterday we discussed some very important points. Now frequently one of the many problems that we encounter when we read a spiritual text, a spiritual classic, is very often we find a conflict when we sincerely try to practice it, to bring it to our experience level. Even those who strongly desire to practice spiritual values, spiritual disciplines, or even after intellectually fully being convinced of many of these great ideas, when we actually try to practice them, there are many problems we call mental blocks. To be more precise, a kind of conflict, a fight between mind and intellect. A conflict between what we want to do and what our mind okays, our mind permits us to do. It's not a very small problem. Technically speaking, if we can always practice and do, think and act and speak as we want to act and speak, there will be very few problems in the world. And it is not lack of sincerity. It's not lack of earnestness. Even if we earnestly try to practice many of these great spiritual ideas, the moment we try, suddenly the mind throws up some mental blocks. To give you an example, so in the Patanjali Yoga Sutra literature, the commentators have given a list of antarayas, means obstacles, vyadhisthanya, etc., samsaya and so on, bhranti darsana, alabdha bhumigata. I'm not going to those details. But in short, the problem is simple. One part of the mind detaches itself from its main body and tries to associate with what we want to do, but the other part pulls it down. As I mentioned yesterday, the secondary personality that emerges when we start associating, connecting with spiritual ideas. The secondary personality is what we want to be. The primary personality is what we actually are right now. So these mental blocks can take the form of procrastination, false justification for not actually practicing. So to give an example, I've seen this depends upon the cultural circles. In India, for example, people who want to start meditation and some programs in the individual life, today is not the right time, not auspicious day. So maybe we can do on another month, a more appropriate, a more auspicious occasion can be in the calendar. it's not a matter of astrological prophecies or predictions, Actually, the mind itself it goes in search of a false justification for not doing what it is not willing to allow us to do, which we actually want to do. That's because there's a conflict between our accumulated tendencies, impressions, which are already stored up in the mental system, and what we really want to start doing anew. Suppose we start tomorrow onwards, I shall start meditation half an hour every day morning. So we really start doing, some false justification for not doing. And so long as the secondary personality is weak, we are more likely to ally ourselves with this later one. But tomorrow we will do that. These sort of things. Now, modern psychology has its own explanations, but yoga psychology and Vedanta psychology go very deep into the system. So it says, we have 3 dimensions to our personality. So in Sanskrit language called, Sukshma Sharira, Sthula Sharira, Karana Sharira. Karana Sharira is our lack of awareness, our lack of understanding our true nature, which is the very basis of everything. That sometimes it is linked to Maya, Avidya, etc., which we discussed yesterday. We wrongly associate ourselves with the unreal, forgetting the real. The real is concealed, the false is projected. Avarana and Viksheba, Shakti Dvayam, it is called 2 dimensions of Maya or Avidya operating in this world, which we discussed yesterday. But now today we are concerned not with the Sthula Sarira, the gross body, which is again very obvious. We know what we actually are, physically speaking. But the Sukshma Sarira is a very complicated thing. It is very real and is very difficult to understand. It is our real personality. And what is Sukshma Sharira? Sukshma Sharira as being analyzed in different Vedanta scriptures in different ways. But the essence is this. Sukshma Sharira is nothing but avidya, kama and karma. Okay, and 5 units. 5 units are 5 senses of perception, 5 senses of action, 5 vital energies, 5 pranas, 5 elements, and avidya, kama, karma. And of which a very important element is the dominating element, that is antakarana. Antakarana is nothing but mana, buddhi, chitta, ahangara in Sanskrit, but in English is very obvious, mind. What is mind? So Vedanta tells you mind is nothing but a function of vrittis. Vrittis are nothing. What is vritti? I shall try to explain. Because this is an important subject discussed here, and understanding the subtle personality, which is our real personality, is vital in understanding ourselves and our problems, our strengths and also weaknesses. So the gross personality is very irrelevant, insignificant from a spiritual perspective. If you look at a man like Gandhi or Lincoln, for 2 examples. Lincoln was 7 feet tall, Gandhi was less than 5 feet. Not a very remarkable human specimens to look at, but a great, mighty personalities who have influenced nations, peoples all over the world. You may agree or disagree with their teachings, that's a different matter. But it's a fact that they could influence human cultures, human civilizations. People may not agree with their views. In India there are many people who won't agree with Gandhi. And here there have been many people who did not fully agree with Lincoln, as you know history. But the point is, these are great mighty personalities. What were their personalities? Antakarana. What is Antakarana? So Antakarana is the man behind the man, or the woman behind the woman, the mind behind the mind, the intellect behind the intellect. Our attitudes, our philosophy of life, our the mental, intellectual influencing factors that regulate our actions, the way we think, the way we feel, the way we look at the world, the way we look at ourselves, the way we look at life. All these are dominated by this single factor, Antakarana. Antakarana is divided into 4 compartments, which are very important to understand the Sukshma Sharira or subtle personality. Incidentally, when people, if you believe in reincarnation, love karma, these 2 doctrines are intrinsically linked to the Sukshma Sharira or subtle personality. What we actually are is not a physical body, but the subtle personality. Look at a man like Stephen Hawking. The Sthula Sharira's gross body, nothing to write home about, but a big, great man in many ways. So you can see many examples. So when you talk about them, when you think about them, when you write about them, you are not writing or thinking about them, about the gross body. Something for which they lived, what they thought, what they wrote about, what they spoke, how they influenced human civilization. That's what we are talking about when we talk about them. So, what is mind to begin with? Vedanta gives a very interesting definition to mind. Sankalpa Vikalpatmika Antakarnavritti Manah. This is the definition, and it is accepted in Sankhya Yoga system, in which mind is one of the evolutes of Prakriti, and also in Buddhist tradition, where mind is actually the root of desire, Trishna, which is responsible for Pradipti Samutpada, which we call dependent origination, which is the essence of Buddhist doctrine of life. And is accepted in Vedanta, in all Indian philosophical systems, including Buddhism and Jainism. So vritti is nothing but what is left out of our action after that action is over. To give an example, suppose you do a good deed, or a good thought, or a good word you speak, or a good noble ideas flashing in the mind. Well, after that action is over, you can look at the result. There is one result, one kind of a result, which is very tangible, visible, which everyone can feel and experience. But that is short-lived. Something else is retained in the mental system. That is a residual effect of our actions, in the form of tendencies, impressions, and a tendency to repeat action if the action produced a pleasant result, a happy result, and to avoid that action if that action produced an unhappy result. So that is called vritti. So vritti is nothing but an invisible result, the residual element of every single physical or mental action. With this vritti, a number of identical actions will produce a strong tendency, so vritti becomes samskara. Samskara becomes vasana, a strong, orientation to do certain things in certain ways. That leads to a decision to repeat an action if the action produced happy result, and to run away from that possibility of that action if it produced unhappy result. So it is called sankalpa, and sankalpa leads to this action. So action again produces vritti, samskara, vasana, sankalpa, karma. Again karma leads to vritti, like that. It is called the karma vritti samskara chakram. This is a term used in Vedanta literature and the yogic interpretative, not in Patanjali Yoga Sutras, but in the works of a famous book called Rajamartanda. It's a well-known book by a king. It's called Bhoja. King Bhoja wrote Rajamartanda. You find many these ideas repeated again in Shankaracharya's Bhashya Vivarana and other books. It's an important super commentary on yoga Bhashya, which was written by Vyasa on Patanjali Yoga Sutra, which I am not going to discuss right now. Those who are interested can listen. We have already 90 lectures, video lectures on Patanjali Yoga system in our YouTube or in the Vedanta Society resources. So now coming to subject, these vrittis, vasanas and samskaras operate in so many different ways. One is a positive tendency, or one kind of speculation, another kind of speculation. It is given the classical literature. Suppose you see an object in front of you, say, it is a post, maybe a wall, and because there is not enough light from a distance in the evening, when you look at it, you may think it is a human being. When you reach it, you understand it's clearly not a human being, it is just an iron post. So when you are speculating whether it is a human form or something else, it is mind that is working. When you reach the object, when you decide it is a iron, is a pillar or not a human being, then our intellect functions. It is called buddhi, nisyatmika antakarana vritti is functioning, buddhi, intellect. And when you identify that object as something that you saw the previous week or the previous day, you are actually bringing from your mental system a memory of seeing that object the previous day. Chittam is working. And when you identify yourself as the one who saw it last week, aham, you are identifying yourself as the one who saw it the previous day, the previous week. So these are four factors that constitute antakarana. It's called in English antakarana, internal organs. In Sanskrit, it is called antakarana, internal organs. So when a person dies and is reborn, all that he accumulates in his mental system, all the impressions, vasanas and samskaras are inherited. That's why you find people who show extraordinary liking and dislikes, skills and prodigious powers of concentration, and extraordinary powers of mind and body maybe. For no reason we can't explain it. You cannot explain that phenomenon in the light of heredity or in the light of upbringing. There are any number of examples. It's because that individual is bringing this from previous life cycle. So when you are born with a bag. In that bag, all tendencies are there. Some are good, some are bad. Some good tendencies may tell you, well, tomorrow I shall go and meditate every day. But there are other tendencies which are not so very friendly. Those tendencies try to pull you back. Oh, no, maybe next week. So these conflicts between mind and intellect are conflicts, actually speaking, between vrittis and impressions or samskaras and memories coming from previous life cycles or from these life cycles, of course, it's possible, which are two diverse types. So you may ask the question, in that case, say when a person dies, his eyes are gone, and eyes constitute the senses of perception by seeing, it is sense of sight. It's gone. And when you hear something, you are using the sense of hearing, ears. So you don't retain these senses of perception when you are born, because those things are gone along with this body in this life. So how can you say this Sukshma Sarira, which include senses of perception, senses of action, born again with you? No, naturally it is not very logical. So Vedanta tells you, these eyes are not reborn, the ears are not reborn, but what you saw with these eyes, remaining as a vritti or samskara, accumulated in the mental system called chittam, they are born again as tendencies, impressions. So in modern psychology, many psychiatrists have tried to explain certain problems, because schizophrenia, especially the delusions of persecution, certain types of phobias, some kind of obsessive psychotic problems, which cannot really explain in the light of law of doctrine of karma and incarnation of human life cycles. That's one way, because there are many tendencies which you cannot explain in the light of experiences belonging to this life. So a child born in a family with an extraordinary skill, absolutely special skills for music, in a family which never produced a single musician, which the child perhaps didn't get an opportunity to listen to any musical program, but born with an extraordinary skill for music. So Vedanta, Buddhism, Yoga, all these Indian philosophical traditions explain these phenomena in the light of doctrine of law of karma and reincarnation. So what it means is this. So Sukshma Sharira is our real personality. And Sukshma Sharira contains, the most important part is this mind, intellect, ego system and memory system, mana, buddhi, chitta, ahankara, all together called antakarana or internal organs, which is one part. Then senses of perception, senses of action, 5 elements and five elements of vital energies, and of course then all the actions we have done, desires accumulate in the mental system, and fundamentally the ignorance of our true nature. This constitutes antakarana. So when a person becomes liberated, what happens, they are all completely neutralized. They are all gone. Mind is emptied of all vrittis, so mind becomes non-mind. So mind becomes non-mind when mind transcends its mental dimension. So no more vrittis are left out. So now, the point is, this text makes an interesting statement. When you reach the highest spiritual realization, what happens is these shackles, these accumulated tendencies and impressions are completely purified, in the sense they're completely neutralized. That state is explained, if you are interested, if you have got a text, it is explained in the 31st mantra or sloka of this text. Vidyade hriday grindhi chidyande sarvasamsyaha kshiyande cha asya karmani tasmin dushte paravare. So vidyade hriday grindhi chidyande sarvasamsyaha. What it says is, when you realize your true nature, that you are the witness, not a participating agent but a non-participating witness. When you realize this, what happens? All the fetters, all the chains that bind you are completely broken. Then only doubts vanish. Chidyande sarvasamsyaha kshiyande cha asya karmani tasmin dushte paravare. What happens when that truth is realized? Then asya karmani kshiyande means all his actions are gone. What it means? Nobody remains quiet. You find some of the most hardworking examples of humanity were those who realized the highest spiritual truth. But here the text tells you, apparently, all karmas are gone. See, Shankaracharya is estimated by Sister Nivedita to be the most hardworking man India ever produced. A man who lived only for 32 years, he founded 10 monastic orders. And Sister Nivedita tells you, in the web of Indian life, Ignatius Loyola founded only one monastic order. That is the Jesuit order, Ignatius Loyola. Augustine, Aquinas, Democritus, even non-Christian Greek philosophers. Shankara wrote much more than most of them. And he wrote the most exquisite Sanskrit poetry. And after realizing this, tasmin dushte paravari, after realizing the highest spiritual truth. And he traveled all over Indian subcontinent, at that time Afghanistan to Burma, Sri Lanka to Badrinath 4 times, walking, mind you. The place he is born is called Kaladi, then another place is the foot of the, it is the foot, you walk with that. And he wrote the most exquisite poetry, the most marvelous Sanskrit commentaries in Sanskrit in India, founded 4 monasteries in 4 corners of India. He is supposed to have renovated some 120 temples, founded 10 monastic orders, including starting what we now call Kumbh Mela, the gathering of monks in Haridwar. And all work finished within 32 years. So when people are going to the +2, 12th grade school, he had already written all the most marvelous commentaries, which today's Pandits take 50 years to study and understand. Vivekananda, he passed away before he reached the 40th year, 39th year, and Sri Ramakrishna below 50th year. So how do you explain this? So those who reach the highest spiritual realization, they start working harder and working more and working in a much broader perspective. Jesus Christ, only 30, but very short, 30 years. So how do you explain this? So the point is, they stop doing anything for themselves, which means they start doing everything for others. So if you read the translation of this in any book, because translation naturally cannot give full meaning. All actions with a definite purpose, with a selfish motive are gone, and that gives you much more energy to work harder, to work better, to work more. So for such a person, every moment becomes an occasion for celebration. Every word becomes a sacred mantra. Every action becomes an act of worship, and every thought becomes meditation. The whole life gets spiritualized, and the whole world becomes a temple or a sacred place of worship. So that is explained in this verse. Hridakashe chidadiktika sada bhadi nirantaram na udedi na astamedi katham sandhyam upasmake. What it means, in your heart of hearts, there is the sun always blazing overhead. It never sets in the west in the evening because it never rises in the east. It is always there. There is no sunset because there is no sunrise. Sun is always there. For them, they don't have to wait for the evening to start their prayers. They don't have to wait for the morning to do their ablutions. Every moment, every second, every action, every word, every act becomes spiritualized. That is what happens to a person whose shackles, fetters are removed. So, well, in Vedantic literature, all these ideas are so graphically explained, but if you minutely study the life and works of great spiritual teachers the world has produced, you find this happened more or less the same way in all traditions. Those of you who are interested in looking for an example from a non-Vedantic tradition, you can read the famous Russian mystical classic. It's called The Way of a Pilgrim, in which the pilgrim learned the art of Jesus' prayer from a Russian Orthodox monk, and immediately he started seeing the light of God everywhere. So you find, this is, I have no time to go into details, but in a few words I would say, it's a famous classic in very short, not a very big book. It's called The Way of a Pilgrim, and the pilgrim continues his journey. 2 parts. It was a manuscript that was found in Mount Athos in Greece, in the Greek Orthodox Church monastery. It's the story of a man who was a humble peasant, who was not a scholar, educated man, who was born somewhere in the 1830s in Russia, close to Siberia. He happened to visit a Russian Orthodox Church, and he happened to listen to a sermon on the first epistle of St. Paul, which is on Jesus' prayer, how to remain in a natural, spontaneous state of prayerfulness. not praying on Sundays, not just renewing your license to do whatever you want through confession every Sunday. No. Rather, to be always in a state of prayerfulness, to be a true Christian. That's the essence of the first epistle of St. Paul. So he listened to this sermon from a Russian Orthodox father who perhaps never meant business when he was giving the sermon. He might have forgotten all about it, but the peasant did not forget. So he came out of the church and he started walking. He was looking for a person, for anybody who could teach him how to remain in a state of perpetual prayerfulness. And eventually he came across an Orthodox, Russian Orthodox monk who took him into his tiny cell, taught him this art of prayerfulness. And when he reached a state through his own spiritual practice, a state of remaining in a state of natural prayerfulness, immediately found the whole world, everything in a new light. So this is what happens when all fetters and shackles are gone. When we realize that we are not the Sukshma Sharira, the psychophysical mechanism, which comes and goes, which incarnates, reincarnates, which is born, which lives and dies, and again and comes back. It is something much more. The psychophysical mechanism and this physical mechanism, Sthula Sharira, Sukshma Sharira, psychophysical mechanism, which are character, these are all reflections of the absolute reality. The reality is reflected in our mind. So, very often we may ask this question, why is there so much of diversity in this world? It's a big question. 8 billion people inhabiting this world belong to 8 billion levels of spiritual growth. 8 billion human beings inhabiting this world will have 8 billion different views on religion, philosophy and God. Why this diversity? So that is being explained in another verse, 32nd verse. That is, Avichinna Siddhabhasas Tridiya Swapna Kalpidakha Vikneyas Trivido Jivas Tatradya Paramarthikakha. So this text tells you, this embodied human being can be viewed from 3 perspectives. So one is avichinna, chidabhasa and swapna kalpidaka. I shall try to explain this in the light of Vedanta philosophy. All this you will now find in translations. In Vedantic tradition, among the traditional scholarly, these traditional conservative pandits who don't learn from universities but who learn from their homes or from their teachers, there is a way. If you want to teach the most elementary text in Vedanta, you should have studied the whole text. And if you want to study one text, you should know everything. So that means if you want to know the contents of a small pot which is filled with water, you should know the whole ocean. The whole ocean should be condensed in a pot, and the pot should be expanded to the size of an ocean. So that is a Vedantic tradition. It's totally different from the university academic tradition, which is so difficult to explain. If you want to know the contents of a pot, you should know the whole ocean. But the pot contains water which is spread out in the whole ocean. If you want to teach the contents, the pot, you should be able to expand to the ocean. And the ocean should be condensed in a pot should be expanded to the ocean. So you find a single verse, Shankaracharya, in a single 2 lines, he explains the whole dynamics of human life and human evolution. Not the highest Brahma Vidya, but what we are right now, from where we begin. So that is the explanation. So there are 3 schools in Vedanta explaining our ordinary life situation and our goal. So one view is this, we are all pots filled with water. The pot and water that it's filled with is like the mind, vasanas, samskaras, impressions, memories, habit formations, tendencies, attitudes, all. So Atman, which is pure, is reflected in that pot. Now, or you can give another example, reflection can be in a mirror also. Now, the quality of reflection does not depend upon what is reflected. It depends upon the quality of the glass of the mirror or the clarity of the water which is there within the pot. So you cannot blame the sun if the sunlight doesn't fully reflect on the surface of the mirror. You take a piece of cloth and clean up the mirror. When the mirror becomes clean, then what happens? The sun reflects much better. If the mirror is dirty, filthy, and full of dust, then you won't get any sunlight. So, referring to this, Swami Vivekananda makes a statement which almost looks like so revolutionary, but the essence of this. What Swamiji says is this: the difference between an amoeba and a Buddha is one of degrees, not of kind. So now what is an amoeba? Amoeba is a very primitive mechanism. Let us say like a mirror which is full of dust and filth, where sunlight cannot reflect. It is not pure internal organs. Buddha doesn't mean Gautama Buddha here. Buddha in Sanskrit means the enlightened one. That's the meaning of Buddha. Of course, Buddha is an example for the enlightened ones, of course. So, what's the difference between a man like Buddha, the enlightened one? I mean, the one who has reached the highest spiritual experience, and the most primitive person. Is a difference in degrees, not in kind. I mean, in amoeba, the reflection is not very clear, because there is a lot of dust. In Buddha, there is no dust, so the reflection is clear. So, the reflection of Atman, of this Sakshi, Drashta, we explained in the last class, on our mind or buddhi or internal organs is what is called a human life, human being. So, every prayer, attending retreats, is an opportunity for us to connect with these ideas, at least once a while, to take our mind away from the marketplace and to connect it with some higher spiritual ideas, is one way of taking a piece of cloth and cleaning up the mirror. So what happens, as the dust is removed, the mirror reflects the sunlight more and more brilliantly, with greater and greater brilliance. So every act of prayer, meditation, reading, contemplation, sravana, manana, dididhyasana. In Sanskrit, there are different qualifications necessary for this practice. So, Vivekachudamani is one text in which Shankaracharya says, for any spiritual seeker, there are a few important qualifications necessary. Medhavi, Purusho, Vidwan, Uhapoha, Vichakshanaha, Uhapoha, Vichakshanaha, Adhigari, Atmavidyayam, Ukta Lekshana Lekshidaha. It's a famous statement in one another one of Shankaracharya's. Medhavi, Purusho, Vidwan, Uhapoha, Vichakshanaha. So one should have metha, pure intellect. What is pure intellect? A pure intellect is that intellect which listens to a great spiritual idea and feels at home with that idea and then retains it. So, dhihi grandhadharana shakti, that is Shankaracharya's own definition. What it means is, real metha is not the intellect of an Einstein or a scientist, is the intellect of a pure spiritual seeker. Because the greatest physicist may not remember a spiritual idea. He may remember all the other doctrines. So a musician can easily learn a composition very easily. A painter can appreciate a painting. A mathematician can appreciate mathematics. But these skills are not enough in spiritual life. In spiritual life, in order to retain what you study, in order to retain in your mind and internalize it, you should listen, then you should contemplate on the meaning, Saravana and Manana it's called, and then you should feel at home with that, then that spiritual idea becomes part of your nature, part of your culture. These qualifications are necessary. If with these qualifications, if we practice, then what happens? The mirror, which is our mind or intellect, is cleaned. And then the Atman reflects in full effulgence. According to Vedanta, all the great spiritual teachers the world has produced were all clean mirrors. So the mirror image and the prototype, they are almost identical. Not the same, because the body is there, but still there is no difference. Okay? So now, this is one school, one way of understanding what we are. That is called Bimba Pradibimba. This is one way of, in Sanskrit, it's called Vada, means a method of analysis, a school of thought. This what means. So one way of analysis is, we are all nothing but reflections of Atman. This view was held by one of Shankaracharya's disciples, Padmapada, who wrote Panchapadika, and Prakashatma Yati, who wrote Panchapadika Vivarana, and Vedanta Desika, who wrote Appaya Dikshita, who wrote the Vivarana Prameya Samgraha. So Shankaracharya's works contain all the essence, the nucleus, the genesis of all these ideas. After Shankaracharya passed away, his disciples and followers built up various theories that are equally valid, equally scientific, logical explanations of what we actually are. We are not, in a way, just alien to our true nature. We are Atman, but right now the reflection is not very clean. If we go on cleaning up the mirror, then we will reflect with full effulgence. It's called Bimba Pradibimba. Those of you who are interested in Indian philosophy may remember, listen later, what is the view was put forward by Padmapada, who wrote Panchapadika, and his follower called Prakashatma Yati, who wrote Panchapadika Vivarana, a commentary on Panchapadika, and Appaya Dikshita, who wrote a commentary on Prakashatma's commentary on Panchapada. It's called Vivarana Prameya Samgraha. It's not of much interest for this class, but just casually mentioned. Okay, now this is one school. Another very interesting analysis is this. Well, that's much more easy to understand. It is called Avachedavada, which is a view of analysis put forward by another great philosopher in India, is known Vajaspati Misra, who is famous for Vajaspati Bhamadi commentary. It's called Bhamadi school, the other is called Vivarana school. So he said, we are all tiny pots, and there is space within the pot. Now, a child will tell you the space is called in English Akasha, sky, open space. So a child will tell you the space within a pot is one thing, and the space outside the pot is something else, it's much bigger. This is what a child will tell you, and many people who are not different from children will tell you this. Now, Vedanta tells you, actually, the space within the pot is identical with the space outside the pot. The pot outside is called Mahakasha, and the space within the pot is called Ghatakasha. Ghadavasthita Akasha. Ghatakasha means the space within the pot. Now, suppose we take up spiritual life very seriously, listening to these spiritual ideas, Mahavakya, Sravana, and then contemplating, then practice sadhana sadhushtaya, the real and unreal, renunciation, a strong desire for spiritual liberation. If you have all these disciplines, and if you approach this text with a sense of sacredness and sanctity, then what happens, our mind begins to change. Now this is very important. The effect of reading scripture, spiritual literature, is in direct proportion with the sense of sanctity and sacredness that we attach to these words. If you read a scripture like we read a novel or a short story, it's certainly better than doing nothing. But it is not, to use modern language, not a big deal. But on the other hand, if you approach the scripture, these great words, any scripture for the matter, with the sense of sacredness and sanctity, then what happens? All our attention, our energy, our mind will be focused on this. And then our mind will start pondering on the meaning of these statements. It is called a mananam in Sanskrit, means contemplating the meaning of what we read or what we hear. We don't take seriously, we don't internalize, and we don't contemplate very seriously if we listen to anything, if we read anything in a very casual manner. So that's why Vedantins tell you, Medhavi, the person should have a sense of sanctity with which he applies his intellect. That metha is nothing but intellectual power, intellectual faculty, which is enriched, spiritually enriched by a sense of sacredness and sanctity. Then what happens? We are breaking the pot. Coming back to the analogy. As I mentioned, the Atman, the divine reality, divine energy, which is all-pervading and immanent, is the same within the pot and also outside the pot. But when we do not realize the identity between the Khadakasha, the space within the pot and the space outside, and we wrongly believe or think that the space within the pot is totally different from the pot, from the space outside, then we are wrong, because we look upon this body as the permanent entity. So once we realize and read scriptures or prayer, meditation or nishkama karma, what happens is, then slowly we begin to realize that we have something other than the psychophysical mechanism within us. This psychophysical mechanism, this body, all these only constitute reflecting media, or like the pot. So when we realize the truth, we are actually breaking the pot. We are cleaning the mirror so that the reality will reflect with full effulgence. This is called avachedavada in Vedantic tradition. Avacheda means ghadavasishta. Avacheda means limitation. That means wrongly we believe, the pot limits the space within it, which is really absolutely wrong and false. So when the experience we already mentioned earlier, at the highest level of spiritual realization, all shackles are broken, all fetters are gone, all chains are broken. If we free, what happens is we are breaking the pot, we are cleaning the mirror. The third example is very interesting. If you can develop an interest in the Vedanta philosophy, there is no entertainment or humor in this, but if you can enjoy this, you find it creates a kind of inner joy. So many Vedantic philosophers, including Vivekananda in fact modern times, says an active interest in spiritual philosophy is a safety valve, is a opening to a higher life. It doesn't mean that philosophy is necessary to realize God, not at all. If your mind is pure, if his mind is always turned towards God, you don't need this philosophy. But if your mind is turned to everything else other than God, then in order to take the mind away from other undesirable channels, you need a counter focus to turn mind towards something sublime, which will help us to prevent from turning from moving towards undesirable channels, which may take us away from God. So that's an idea behind. There is a purifying effect in scriptural studies. So third school is called Abhasavada, which was again held by another disciple of Shankaracharya called Sureshwara. Is a Vartika. He wrote the Brihadaranyaka Upanishad, Bhashya Vartikam and other Vartikas. So anyway, coming to subject, it's nothing but this. Suppose you bring a crystal near a red flower. For some reason, we feel that crystal, white crystal has become red in color, which is really wrong. If you move the flower away, the crystal is again pure white. So like that, all the wrong associations have given the wrong impression that our mind is, that we are this mind, nothing more than that, or this body or the intellect, nothing more than that. So we take away these wrong associations, like moving the red flower away from the crystal retains its whiteness. Now, a most important question which is relevant in practical life, I shall come to that. Then I shall conclude today. 1 minute. What's the effect of all this? One may ask. Now, Bhigdide Hriday Granthi, Chiddinde Sarvasamsyaha, Kshiyandi Chasya Karmani, Tasmin Tushte Paravare. This is what we discussed earlier. When you realize this truth, all shackles are gone, all chains are broken, all doubts are gone. Actually, doubts will disappear only when we get a little bit of experience. And that should be understood. Even intellectual conviction is impossible unless you have a bit of experience. People who believe, I will argue and realize the truth, that they are totally wrong. Very often, we think we can have a GPS system in spiritual life. So that logically we can analyze and chase and follow a route and reach the goal. No. As we evolve in spiritual life, then only the path becomes clear. So this text tells you, when you reach this realization, something happens to our mind, our life. It's called Chitta Prasada. A very wonderful word is used in the yoga literature also. It means mind reaches a state of effortless serenity, inner contentment, a divine spiritual contentment, and a kind of inexplicable happiness and lightness. So, if you want to know why Sri Ramakrishna was so happy all the time, he was the most humorous, person among the great prophets the world spiritual teachers the world have produced. He was always laughing. So people who went to him, this man is always smiling and laughing. Because what happens, as I mentioned yesterday, the first and the most important sign that you are a spiritual seeker is Santushta Sadadam Yogi Yatatma Dhrunise. Santushta means you should be always, instead of contentment, a kind of inner happiness. If you claim, I am a devotee of God, and you feel miserable, actually it is a blasphemy. It's an insult to God. Suppose somebody tells, I am a devotee and looks miserable, unhappy and wretched, actually you are insulting God. So, that's why Bhagavad Purana, one of the great devotional classics, tells you, Nityotsvam Bhavatesham Nityasri Nityamangalam. It says in the description of Prahlada, was a great devotee, when he had a vision of the Lord, he says, every day is a holiday. Not holiday, it is holy day. There are two different words. One is a modifier, it's an adjective, the other is a verb. It's not a single word. Holy, a day, this is holy, in that sense. So every day is an occasion for celebration. Nitya Sri Nitya Mangala. And every day, every moment is, Nityam doesn't mean every day. Nityam actually means every nimisha, that's the Vedantic. Nimisha means the time that you need to open and close your eyelids. So every occasion, every moment is an occasion for celebration. That is what you find in a person. That's called Chitta Prasada. Prasada is not what you eat from the temple. In way, it has got a name because that makes you, that gives you a kind of inner contentment. So prasada is explained in yoga literature. There's elaborate descriptions. In fact, all samadhis are explained as ways to attain the chitta prasada. In the Bhagavad Gita, you find prasadam adhigacchati. That means a sthita prajna, a spiritual enlightened person attains the chitta prasada. Means when the mind has reached a state where it feels it doesn't have to seek anything other than that, where it stops looking for anything else, where it doesn't seek anything. It has reached a kind of self-contentment. And that contentment will be expressed as a kind of equanimity of mind, serenity of mind, the ability to look at the world and life and everyone without being shocked by that. So in the Gita, in the 12th in the second chapter, Lord Krishna says, "Esha brahmi sthiti partha nainam prapi vimukhiti sthitvasya mantakalebi brahmanirvanam richadi." Shanti is mentioned here. The Brahmi is Shanti, prasadam adhigacchati. So this is called Chitta Prasada. This Chitta Prasada is the most visible sign of a person whose shackles are broken, whose fetters are gone, doubts are answered. In fact, doubts are never answered. You transcend doubt. Really speaking, in spiritual life, you don't get an answer to your doubt to your intellectual level. You transcend the stage of asking doubts, because you realize the fact these questions are no more relevant. That's how questions are answered in Vedanta. And that answer comes in the form of experience. The experience expresses itself as this serenity, this contentment is called Chitta Prasada. Okay, now we will have interaction. You are most welcome to ask questions from any perspective. Yeah.
Several. Thank you so much.
Yeah.
My first question is with reincarnation. So how do Vedantins deal with Darwin?
Excuse me?
How do Vedantins deal with Darwin?
How Darwin I understood. What is the other word you used?
How did Vedantins?
Oh, okay, I told you yesterday, Vedanta is, if you present creationism and evolutionism and contrast these two views with Vedanta, you find the Vedanta it appears to be closer to evolutionism rather than creationism. Because creationism is almost the very antithesis of Vedanta for several reasons. One reason is, I tell you, when I talk about Vedanta, I am talking about Advaita Vedanta, non-dualistic system of philosophy. But if you look at other non-Advaitic systems of Vedanta, or if you look at the doctrine of many popular monotheistic traditions of popular Hinduism, you find many of them endorse some kind of creationism. But in non-dualistic philosophy, creationism is completely denied. The idea that God creates this world, or somebody creates this world, and the world is created as such, is totally opposed to non-dualistic system of philosophy. But you find this the creationism, you find in many non-Advaitic systems, so no doubt about it. And where actually Vedanta come to Darwin. Of course, Darwin perhaps focuses on the biological selection and evolution of the Sthula Sharira. See, we cannot have we cannot have another head or another eye. We cannot have this kind of another development. So Darwinian concept is limited to physical evolution, physical change, physical movement. Vedanta, on the other hand, says the higher and higher manifestation of Atman within, which is already there, is nothing but higher and higher manifestation of the reality which is already within. That's an interesting thing to remember. Even in the most insignificant creature, Atman is present, but it may not have antakarana, mind or intellect. Any object which has no buddhi or mind and intellect cannot have a reflecting medium. So, the difference between, for example, a wall where the sunlight is spread everywhere and a patch of light that you throw on the wall with the mirror. So this example given by Vidyaranya in Panchadasi is a very big book, an important book on Vedanta. It's he wrote about 500 years, 600 years after Shankaracharya, Vidyaranya. So he says, and there's a very logical analysis which is widely accepted. He says, what's the difference between, let us say, a rock, a mountain, and let us say a human being? So the difference is this: Atman is everywhere. Atman, divine reality, is all pervading, it is omnipresent. But in a human being, there is a reflecting medium. So it has got a reflection. So if you throw a patch of light on the wall with a mirror, you find a small patch of light on the wall. That small square patch of light appears to be different from the wall. The light is both on the wall and also it's specially manifest on this patch of light thrown by the mirror image. Like that, in all of us, Atman is there. As we evolve in spiritual life, as we go on enriching, purifying, spiritualizing our actions, our thoughts and ideas, our mind becomes pure. It is freed, cleansed of all. All the undesirable tendencies, impressions are completely removed. Then the sunlight manifests in full effulgence. So it is not the evolution of the physical body which is totally insignificant or irrelevant in Vedantic context. It is the higher and higher manifestation of the presence of Atman which is already there. It manifests with higher and higher effulgence. So evolution is not at the physical level, as Darwin says, but in the degree of higher and higher, more and more, clearer and clearer manifestation of the Atman within. Yes, sir. Yeah.
Swami? Oh,
Yeah.
it's okay.
You know, those ideas are put forward by some enthusiastic people. When these questions were put to me earlier, so those ideas, I mean, the avatars, the 10 avatars, for your information, those of you know, our Hindu mythological literature tells you that Vishnu incarnated Matsya Kurma Varaha, means fish and tortoise and different animals, eventually reaching human being. You know, that is an interpretation recently put forward by some over-enthusiastic people who want to maybe I don't criticize anyone, but it's not very, I don't take it very seriously, that's all. I don't want to criticize. You can interpret, no, people do interpret that way, you know. In fact, in India, for example, Christian preachers, they would say that crucifixion of is a kind of way of Christian. In fact, Prajapati Yagam is called. Crucifixion is depicted by the overzealous, enthusiastic evolution, I mean the evangelicals in India, Pentecost, all those people as a kind of Vedic ritual. So on both sides, this kind of interpretations are there. Very often what I find is people who put forward these theories are not very profound in their understanding of scriptures. That's what I have noticed. People who superficially find comparisons. There are certainly many common factors, but this is I heard about this and I felt it doesn't deserve much discussion, in fact. Okay.
When speaking about the pot, the finite and the infinite, what is the interrelationship? What are the dynamics between Satchitananda and the Shakti?
Yeah, okay, now Satchidananda here corresponds to the Mahakasha, which is everywhere. The same Satchidananda, the same absolute reality it appears, not really, appears to be limited by the size and shape of the pot. Actually, it is only momentary thing. When the pot is broken, you can see there is nothing which is different from the Mahakasha. So, Shakti is nothing but what we call the operational dimension of the absolute reality. It is in its dynamic dimension. So one may ask the question, well, Brahman is omnipresent, all-pervading, then why are there so many different types of phenomena, so much diversity in the world? So it can be explained in the light of various levels of the manifestation of Brahman or at various levels of Shakti, potency. So, yeah.
And this is pertaining to yesterday. In one of the principal Upanishads, there is a discussion about the two birds on the tree.
Yeah.
Would you share that with us?
Yeah, it comes in the Atharva Veda Mundaka Upanishad. It's an imagery. You find Dva Suparna Soija Sakhaya Samanam Vriksham Barishus Jade Tayor Anyapiparam Swadati Anasnan Nanyu Abhichakasi. This is a famous verse which you find in the Mundaka Upanishad, which comes in the Atharva Veda. So it is very simple, but it's very profound. One tree, and there are two birds, one sitting on the branch above, the other below, another branch below. They look alike, they are very similar, they are totally identical. Now, this bird, the bird sitting on the lower branch goes on eating fruits, some sweet fruits, which makes that bird happy, and sometimes bitter fruits, and the bird becomes unhappy when he eats the bitter fruits. So, and as it goes on ascending to the higher level, towards the bird sitting on the higher branch, it goes on, it becomes more and more steady. When you reach the higher branch, when it is close to the other bird, which is sitting quiet, without eating either bitter fruits or sweet fruits, is always serene and happy, then the bird, which becomes happy and unhappy because of sweet and bitter fruits, I understand it is not different from the other bird. So the bird sitting above, it doesn't eat anything, it is always happy, serene and contented. It's never unhappy because it never seeks happiness. It doesn't go after fruits thinking it is sweet. So it doesn't have to eat bitter fruits because it doesn't go for any kind of fruits. But the fruits, the bird below is always seeking sweet fruits. And all the time you won't get sweet fruits, sometimes you eat bitter fruits. Like that, ordinary embodied beings, when they understand, well, they are this, like pots, this space within the pot, when they understand themselves to be the psychophysical mechanisms, and not Atman. Due to their ignorance, we always identify ourselves with our mind or intellect or this body. So we go after many experiences, sometimes good, sometimes bad, sometimes sweet fruits, sometimes bitter fruits. So in the same human body, which is in the imagery, this body is the tree. Within this body, there is the higher bird, the bird sitting on the branch above, which is Atman. But right now, we don't identify ourselves with that bird. We identify ourselves with our mind, which corresponds to the bird sitting below. So naturally, we go on seeking happiness, so we end up suffering, encountering unhappiness. So the Upanishad tells you, every spiritual practice, listening to scriptures, meditation, japa, contemplation, all correspond to the effort of the bird sitting below, slowly to ascend and reach the top branch. And when our mind becomes completely pure, then what happens is that suddenly we realize we start identifying ourselves with the higher bird which is already there. So this body is the tree. Two birds are there within us. Yesterday I told you the secondary personality. So when we start meditation, even when we read a good book, spiritual work, suddenly we confront another spiritual possibility, a higher possibility for our life and the world. But then we are not able to fully focus on that. We get distracted. Again we come back to that. So as we persist more and more, then what happens, we end up identifying ourselves with a secondary personality, which is called Jiva Brahma Aikyam. It means all the fetters are broken, all the chains are gone. That means when you realize the highest truth, then all doubts are gone, all shackles, all fetters are broken. Then we feel a kind of inner contentment, and that contentment cannot be explained, it can only be experienced. And yesterday somebody asked, that contentment expresses itself in the form of looking at life and world and everyone with a kind of serenity, and a kind of, if you feel a spiritual, you look upon life, and the whole creation is a spiritual family, one spiritual entity. That's the idea. Yeah. You have 5 minutes.
I have a question about, in the Hindu philosophy, it's more from an ignorant perspective because I'm not, and I wanted to have you shed light on this. There are these different branches of, so there's Rig Veda, and there's Sama Veda, and Atharva Veda, and all that. Why are there different branches of these things if the universal truth is just one? What do these things do?
I will tell you, I want to explain this. It needs a little bit of knowledge of the evolution of Vedic literature. These Vedas, different branches of Vedas, used to be taught by hermits in their forest hermitages. They belong to different gotras, different tribal schools, tribal branches of the ancient Aryan race. So Veda, and long before these Vedas were codified into written form, which may have been the first effort to give a written presentation may have taken place around 2nd century BC. So they were all transmitted through oral tradition. So you can give, for example, those of you who have read it, Chandogya Upanishad, the 6th chapter, Uddalaka, is an ancient sage. So one day, he was traveling in what is now Afghanistan, Pakistan, West Punjab, Multan, those places. Then he returned to his home, and he found a little boy, his own son, was ignoring education. He didn't study the Vedas. So all these sages in ancient times, they lived in forest hermitages and taught Vedas to their disciples who came from all over Indian subcontinent. So you find there were many branches. For example, Samaveda had more than 1,000 branches, which now many of them have become extinct, whatever maybe. So what happens, they evolved into so many branches. So around 2nd century BC, they were organized into 4 groups, which is called Rigveda, Yajurveda, Samaveda, and Atharvaveda. And again, each of these Vedas were again later on classified under 4 categories, depending upon their main focus and content. So those parts of the 4 Vedas, which mostly contained hymns praising different deities, gods and goddesses, came to be called Samhita. And those branches, those portions of the Vedas which dealt with the rituals, with the details of the performance of rituals, Vedic rituals, were called Brahmanas. And many of the higher philosophical ideas taught by the retired householders living in forest hermitages were called Aranyakas. And when Shankaracharya was born 8th century AD, what he did, he took, because he had memorized all the 4 Vedas, everything, in his mind, he classified all the major portions of all the 4 Vedas. And they used to be called Upanishads, but they were never a single compact whole, as we find today. So he selected 10 of the Upanishads and wrote commentaries on them. So the actual classification must have taken place in Shankara's head. That is the scholar's view. Because before him, these Upanishads as a separate, today even Gita Prasad, Adhyama Prakash, they have written Upanishads. On the one hand, Aranyaka, Brahmana, that did not exist, in fact. These are all taught by oral tradition. In fact, still even now, in many of the Vedic schools, you find in the big Vedic school, there is not one book. They may have books in the library, but the little children have to learn everything memorized. So the oral tradition still continues in, not everywhere, in some places which I'm familiar with. So that's how it is being preserved today. So remember, anything which takes a written form is likely to have interpolations. What is transmitted through oral tradition will remain pure. That's because who preserved this oral tradition? People who took bath in the cold water early morning at 3:30 and won't really have their breakfast before studying this. So they attached, you may call it superstition, but that superstition, we should thank them for that superstition, for having a discussion today in Vedanta. Because a kind of almost rigid fanatical dedication teaches with a kind of sanctity and sacredness. That helped them to continue this oral tradition, oral transmission. So we'll continue the discussion maybe in the afternoon. Please remember we will have next session at 3 o'clock, 3 to 4:30 p.m. Right now we will have half an hour break, and then from 12 to 1 p.m. meditation in the lecture hall, in the shrine in front of the lecture hall. 1:15 to 2:15 lunch, 3 to 4:30 the next session discussion. Thank you. Om Shanti 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 Harihi Om Tat Sat Sri Ramakrishna Arpanamastu.
on